Hello and welcome to Hurt Less, Live More. It's the show where we talk about all the kinds of hurts and pain that we can go through in life and how we can get through it all and end up thriving and living the life that we want to live. And I'm JJ, the Practical Alchemist, and I'm here as ever with Dr. Mark Goulston, the psychiatrist and coach who is all the way over in Los Angeles. I'm here in Scotland, and we have with us Alexandra Wyman. And Mark, I'm going to let you introduce Alexandra. Welcome, Alexandra, but I'll let you do the formal honors.
It is my pleasure. Alexandra was on my podcast, My Wake Up Call, and she was she was wonderful with such a tender and tough subject. So let me tell you about her. She's an advocate and public speaker for resources in the aftermath of suicide. After she lost her husband to suicide in August of 2020, she found a need to change the rhetoric around suicide and decided to write about it. Her memoir, The Suicide Club, What to Do When Someone You Love Chooses Death, is an Amazon bestseller. She's spoken at the Colorado School Counselor Association's annual conference, the Orthodox Christian Association of Medicine, Psychology, and Religion, their annual conference, and Bridging the Divide, Suicide Prevention and Awareness at their summit in 2022. And she joins us now she's also an occupational therapist and lives in Colorado. And welcome, Alexandra.
Oh, thank you so much for having me today. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, welcome, Alexandra. We want to hear a lot more about your story. Mark, did you have a question to kick off with?
Well, I think we kind of oriented you a little bit, but the purpose of Hurt Less, Live More is it's our observation that a lot of people, when they feel hurt or fear, they run away into coping mechanisms that often aren't that healthy. The pain is so much, so they run away into eating disorders, into drinking, into bad decision making. And we believe that when people, and you're a wonderful example of this, is that when people can talk about and share their hurt and feel listened to, they don't have to run away from it as much. I was thinking of, every week I'm thinking of writing a book, but I was thinking of writing a book called The Abreaction Cure. And abreaction is an old, funky psychological term. And what it means is feeling repressed feelings, the ones we push down and away, and then expressing them. So it's not enough to just feel them. They need to be expressed, but they need to be expressed to an audience or to a person who doesn't push you away, who invites you in. And in that conversation, we can dare to feel the hurt and not run from it. So any of that trigger anything for you, Alexandra, because we do want to hear your story in any way you want to tell it.
Well, I feel like you're telling my story. And that's absolutely how it goes, is there can be an overwhelming sense of emotions, and it's complicated. I don't think I knew that I could feel as many emotions as I did all at once and in a short period of time, and to even try and figure out how to start working through those. And I do agree as well that you have to be able to express them. It doesn't always have to be verbal. Writing things down is helpful. I do think there is a lot of power in being able to say what you're feeling. And it's true. And I even did engage in some numbing techniques. I admit there were months where I was drinking more than I wanted to. There were times where I would just turn on the television and watch show after show just to not necessarily avoid. There was a little bit of avoidance, but I also think it was just to put off what I needed to do until I felt that I could actually start to peel apart what was going on. And I think that's something in our society that has been encouraged, is not to feel those I say quote negative feelings. I don't necessarily, I think they're very crucial feelings for us to have, but often they're given a very negative connotation, but we have to feel those too. And often we're told not to, because somehow it makes us weak or whatever excuse that there is in it. But I love that idea for your book. I'll read it.
Yeah. Mark has loads of great ideas for books. And I love the way you talk about how it's not always about avoiding dealing with something. It's about putting it off until you can get to that point where you can deal with it. I totally resonate with that. Yeah.
I didn't know I was a private griever. I found that out through my process. And I would find that sometimes there were certain things I couldn't, when those emotions or feelings would hit me, I couldn't address them right then.
Yeah.
And so it took me a while to figure out how to manage that so I wouldn't avoid them. So sorry, Mark, I think I cut you off.
No. This is a dialogue, and everything you say is very valuable. There's an exercise that I'm doing with people with the ab reaction cure, which I'd like you to do with yourself if you're willing. It's for me, it was going back to low points in my life when I felt down and hopeless. And I can picture myself. One of those times was when I dropped out of medical school for the second time. And I think it wasn't to see the world. It was because I was really depressed. And I can see this sort of empty, caved in expression on my face, and I gone back to that me at 25, that was 50 years ago. And I'm not sure what I did to run away, but I'm sure I did a bunch of things. And I've had a conversation with me at 25 saying, would you believe it? This is what happens to you in the next 50 years. You not only make it through medical school, I was dropping out for the second time. You not only come back and finish, but these are all the things that you did. And then going through this has enabled you to reach people that very few people can reach. And I had a wife who cut her losses with me, which I can't blame her, because I was kind of a loser. And I say, you go on to be married, you go on to have kids, you go on to have grandkids. And so I can picture me at 25 looking at me like, you're crazy. What do you mean? And then I do this connection, and I can see his face looking at me in disbelief that that's the future I have. I'm about to drop out, and I'm not sure I'm ever going to come back to medical school. And if I hit some low points, I'm not sure I'm ever going to come back. So what I'd like to ask of you is, if you could imagine yourself August 2020, if you can imagine yourself going, about to become numb, about to, drink a little bit too much. And where you've come from that, how you've gone on to, inspire so many people, probably save a bunch of lives, comfort a lot of people. Can you imagine going back to you before you went down that road of numbness and a little bit of drinking? And what's the conversation you would say to that younger you?
Oh, that's a good one. I was just so enamored with you talking about the exercise that I forgot that you were going to ask me about it. I think if I were to go back to myself then, I would just say, keep moving forward, or just, finding Nemo, just keep swimming. I think just putting one foot in front of the other, and you can get through this. You will get through this. And I think it is amazing, and it's a process I'm still going through of really coming to terms with, yes, I wrote this book and it's amazing, and I'm getting these beautiful opportunities, and I'm connecting with people, and I feel like my purpose has completely shifted and changed, and to know that if I could just help one person, and I think more than that is the just keep going, because you will make those connections. You will be able to hopefully help one person be able to even think about suicide differently, think about their life differently, or be able to come to terms and know you can do this. Because I think that essentially was one of the most overwhelming feelings I had, was I can't do this. I don't know how, and I'm not going to be able to.
So can you imagine that Alexandra from August 2020 looking at you, kind of in disbelief, and that's nice to hear, but it hurts so much. It hurts so much. I don't know how I make it through each day. Can you look into her eyes and see her pain and invite her to look into your eyes and say, I am not some counselor. I am not some outside person. Look at me, younger Alexandra. I am you, and I wouldn't lie to you.
And that's beautiful. Yeah.
You're going to get through this. And there'll be days when you don't imagine how you're going to make it through it. And the hurt's going to be so overwhelming, and you're going to feel different from other people you meet who will say, oh, do you have kids? Are you married? Well, I was married. Oh, did you get divorced? Not exactly. And can you imagine looking into her eyes, and she's just looking at you with this utter helplessness, and she's somehow willing to take in what you're saying to her because you're her. Can you picture that?
Yes. Yes. Very, very vividly, actually. I think one of when you're saying that, what comes up for me is how at that point in time, things felt so dark and helpless and uncertain. And I'm someone who, I like certainty. I know a lot of people do. I like to have an idea of how things are going to play out. And in that moment, or in any of those moments in the immediacy, there was a lot of uncertainty. But to look through my eyes now and to see that it's more vibrant and colorful, and that there's access to joy and planning, and being able to see that there's a lot more life left to live, and to feel that and know that is a huge contrast from what I was experiencing in the immediacy.
When I did the exercise, which I've done on several occasions with my 25-year-old self, and I'm not sure I was thinking suicide, but I was going down for the count, and when I imagine merging this saying to that younger self, what you're going through is going to enable you to connect with people in this kind of pain and help them get through it. In fact, it's going to define your professional life. You're going to be one of the better ones who does this. And right now I'm switching to me when I was that 25-year-old, and I'm just looking at me, tearing up, and if I was asking my younger self, what are you tearing up about? I think he would look at me and say, you're saying there's hope for me. I have no idea what hope for me is. So can you sort of track along with that?
Oh, yes. I think in any in these types of situations, it absolutely, I love this process. And I think that tying it back to yourself, I don't think we do that enough, right? Often we just hold on to whatever our grudges are, things from the past, without being able to look at our gains and how far we've come. That's why here in Colorado, hiking, I remind myself, turn around and look back at how far you've come. Turn around and look at the journey you've made. because even if it is one small step at a time, you're still moving forward. And being able to look back at yourself and say, you were in a hopeless state and now I can show you. That's very healing to go back and do that and to say, I had your back, you got your back, and you can trust the process. And that's hard, again, because it's uncertain, and to be able to have these kinds of exercises to go back and do that. I'm already trying to take notes over here so I can continue doing that, because I think there are times, even still in my journey, where I'm still comparing to what my life was supposed to be like or going to be like and what it is now, and seeing that difference while also understanding that my purpose has changed and I align very much with my current purpose. And I still notice the difference between what was and what is now. And just bringing that continued hope is very comforting.
Well, I'm glad. JJ, did you have a thought before taking us to our break?
I have had a thought, and I was just about to take us to our break. You're very good at judging these timings. I'm really curious. I want to ask you, but we'll do this after the break. I want to ask you, Mark, how does this process work? Because I love it. I love the power of it. But I wondered if I could turn the tables on you a bit and ask you if you can tell us what the process is within us that allows this to be so really powerful. But we'll do that right after these messages from our station sponsors. We'll be back right after this.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
And you're listening to Hurt Less, Live More here on UK Health Radio with me, JJ, the Practical Alchemist, Dr. Mark Goulston, and our guest today, Alexandra Wyman. And Mark, I suggested before the break that you might want to, I think it's just interesting to unpick the process that's at play in that little thing that you asked Alexandra to go through earlier. It seemed very powerful, but I'm just wondering, I'm curious, how does it work?
Well, I'm going to give you and our listeners a mini masterclass in this. If you can imagine how our personality forms, before we're born, we're complete. I mean, if we have a mother who's not a drug addict and is more or less taking care of herself, when we're in her womb, our wish is her command. We're hungry, we get fed. We feel cold, we get warmed up. And I think one of the reasons we cry so loudly when we're born is we go from omnipotent with a remote control in our little fetal hand to powerless and helpless, and we can't communicate to the world what we need, and they're not hearing us. And I think that's one of the reasons we cry so loud. And I think actually part of our journey in life is to rediscover that wholeness. And we have a whole lifetime to do it. And sadly, not that many people discover it. And so if you can imagine, after we're born, every time we step into the unknown, which is almost every moment when you're an infant, we look back at primarily our mother, but to the best that he can do it, our father. And when we look back and we're not communicating it very well, when we're stressed out and we're crying, and then later on we're upset by a bad grade in school, there's 4 ways that our parents can respond to us. They can coddle us, and there's a lot of that going on in America with helicopter parents. They can coddle us, which bails us out from a bad mood because we don't want to, because, we're feeling anxious as parents. The problem is the world isn't going to coddle us. So we get spoiled sometimes rotten and sometimes helpless. Or they can be critical of us. We're feeling hurt and scared, and they say, come on, stop crying. Stop crying. If you're a little boy, come on, man up. Don't be a little wuss. And so if the world responds to us with criticism, we internalize that. And then when we get into our adolescence and we run into obstacles, we blame, because we were being blamed by our parents. That's what we internalized. The third thing that can happen is that there's nobody there. Our parents are preoccupied. They have their own problems. We're all alone. And what happens is, as we get older, we're scared and we don't take chances, because if we take chances and it doesn't work out, there's nobody there. So those are three ways, or a combination of them, that the world can respond to us, and we internalize that. And there's a fourth way, and the fourth way is what I call loving teacher, mentor, coach. And I had that in medical school because my parents, they did the best they could, but it was more of a combination of criticism and absence. And so, when I'd run into adversity and I'd reach inside to what I internalized, that wasn't very great. And what happened is, I think JJ knows this, and I don't know if I shared this when you were on my wake-up call, but when the medical school wanted to kick me out, which they wanted to do when I was going for a second leave of absence, the head of the school was worried that I'd go off the deep end. And he didn't tell me that they were going to kick me out. So he sent me over to the dean of students, who cares about students, not about fundraising. And I think he changed my life, or saved my life. So he was my first taste of a loving teacher, mentor, coach. And he hit me with something I call the trifecta of hope. When we read the letter from the main person, the main dean, that said, I've spoken with Mr. Goulston. We talked about another career. I'm recommending to the promotion committee that he be asked to withdraw, which is a euphemism for being kicked out. So my first taste of a loving teacher, mentor, coach was when I read that, and I asked him, what does it mean? He said, you've been kicked out. And I cratered. I mean, I literally folded over. It was like a body blow. And then he hit me with these three things that changed everything forever. He said, you didn't mess up, but you are messed up. But if you got unmessed up, I think this school would be glad they gave you a second chance. And then the first leg of teacher, mentor, coach is, he said, even if you don't get unmessed up, even if you don't become a doctor, even if you don't do anything the rest of your life, I'd be proud to know you. So that was unconditional love. And at that point, I started just frying from this compassion. I didn't know what he was doing. And then the second thing he said is, you don't realize how much the world needs you. And you're not going to realize it till you're 35, which is like 8-10 years from now. So he saw a future for me. And then the third thing he said is, but you have to make it till you're 35. And you're going to let me help you. So he didn't say, if I could help you, give me a call. I wouldn't have called him. False pride. And, maybe I would have made it through it, but maybe I wouldn't have. So the combination of unconditional love, seeing a future for me, and his going to bat for me when I felt helpless, changed everything. And so because of that, I internalized him as my first mentor, a loving teacher, mentor, coach. And I did take a year off, and I actually spent time at a place called the Menninger Foundation, which is a famous psychiatric center. And I actually discovered that I had sort of a knack. I didn't think I had anything, but I was able to reach schizophrenic young adults. And, I grew up in a suburb of Boston. What did I know about the farm and all that? And then having done that, I came back and I had internalized what he did for me. And then I finished med school, went on trained in psychiatry, and became a specialist in suicide prevention. So can you follow those steps? And a lot of times we can't change what the parenting we got when we're living under the same roof. But I know as a study with an N of one, me, so I guess I have a control group, maybe the people I've helped by doing the same thing. When you go out in the world and you find that mentor, and it's not just a supervisor focused on your project, it's someone who's glad to see you. It's someone who you put a smile on their face, not for what you do, but for who you are. And after that first mentor, I've had 7 mentors afterwards, last one being Larry King from CNN, and then a leadership fellow, Warren Bennis, before him. And there was this mutual love. When I'd see them, it wasn't, let's just focus on what you're working on. I mean, I put a smile on their face that was unconditional. And that's why I now mentor about 45 people. So could you follow that, JJ? Did that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about putting a smile on people's faces. And I know that Alexandra, she talks about going forward to joy. So we are talking about bringing that smile back. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that, Alexandra.
Oh, sure. Well, one of the things that I wanted to say in regards to what you've been saying, Mark, is what is amazing about this dean of students that you talk to and the other mentors you had is that they saw you as the person. They saw past your behavior. And even in the work that I do, I say behavior is communication. And if we can, go past the behavior, and I think often we stop at the behavior because that's what's in the forefront. That's what's triggering for us, whether it's in friendship, relationship, parenting, what have you. But when we can get past the behavior and actually see the individual or see what's going on for them is, to me, where I think the magic is, where you can kind of work through it and put your own ego aside in order to say, there's something deeper here. And I think that's remarkable that you found people to do that for you, because I think that's something a lot of people are searching for and maybe don't know that they're searching for that, but searching to be seen for who they really are. And yes,
I think that's really important. I think a lot of people are searching for that and they don't even realize that that's what they're searching for. So so I think it's great. Thank you, Mark, for explaining or, going through that process, because I think it's very useful for people to understand.
Well, there's a practice that I'm employing now, and you haven't heard of Alexandra. I think I may have covered it with JJ. I wasn't close to my grandparents because they lived at a distance, but I see my 4 grandchildren who are 4.5 and under every day because we have a pool. And, my wife was right. Let's keep the house, because if we go into an apartment, they're going to get restless and they're going to want to come and go. And, since we have a nice little pool, they like to stay around. And something that I'm practicing with them, when I see them, I bathe them in utter delight. I rid my mind of my ego. I rid my mind of what's on my email. What are some of these ego-driven things I'm doing? And when I'm with them, I bathe them in utter delight, and they take a second look. So when they're playing with each other and they look up at me and I hit them with utter delight, they look at me like, what is that? And it feels so healthy. And people get that. And I'm now practicing that on my podcast. And even though JJ is a little bit, close to the chest in the way she carries herself because she's Scottish, when I see her, I bathe her in utter delight. I mean, she's a work in progress, but I'm going to keep doing it.
Oh.
And someone said, so what does utter delight look like? I said, it's the look in your dog or cat's eye when you come home from work and they see you.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you use that, I mean, I'm doing this with waiters and waitresses wherever I can. You know, they'll serve me and they'll say, is there anything else? And I'll look at them and I'll read their name tag, you know, which most people won't say. And then I'll look at them. I'll say, yes, there is one more thing. And they say, what? And I look into their eyes and I go, thank you. Can you follow that? And they just, it sort of gets in. So that's my new positive mission is, go out there and be the puppy dog to everyone you meet that loves that person.
I love it. And you're a dog owner as well, Mark. So it's got to be the puppy dogs, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think that ties in perfectly to the idea of moving forward to joy is being able to set aside some of the trivial things that happen in our day-to-day life and being able to look at a bigger picture, see and it's not easy, doesn't happen all the time. I'm still a work in progress myself, and being able to find those little instances throughout the day that can bring joy, that can bring a smile. And for whatever reason, and I've gone through this myself where I've stopped and said, well, I don't want to pay it forward. Look what life handed me. When you get down that spiral of shame and depression, and stopping myself and going, no, this isn't something that happened to me. This is something that happened for me. And what is so wrong with trying to pay my slight little sliver of joy forward to someone else? Because maybe I'll hit someone and they'll want to do something nicer for another person. And I love that concept of just being able to say that absolute thank you. Or, one thing I love to tell my son is, it's so good to see you every morning. Like, I'm so happy I get to be your mom and get to see you. And I don't know if it'll work long term, but that's something that I try to tell him to shift. It's not about what you do. It's about who you are.
I love that. I think that's beautiful. I would have loved for somebody to have said that to me every morning. That would have been beautiful. Well, let's just hold that thought. It's time for another break. And so we'll be back with more on going forward into joy from me and Mark and Alexandra right after this from our station sponsors.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
And you're listening to Hurt Less, Live More here on UK Health Radio, the world's #1 talk health radio station, with me, JJ, the Practical Alchemist, and Dr. Mark Goulston, and our guest this week, Alexandra Wyman. And Alexandra, you gave a lovely example before the break of how you offer this beautiful approval and you honor your son every day. And Mark, I think you've got something to add to that.
Now, that reminds me of something that the headmaster of my children's elementary school did, and he sadly died way too young from lung cancer. He must have been stressed because he was a chain smoker. But one of the things that he would do is he'd say and these are parents who are in Los Angeles. It's a bubble of competitiveness. They want their kids to go through these schools and do well and get into fancy colleges. And I've always had very mixed feelings about that, because they lose their human being in order to become human doings who burn out about 30 years later. But I'm kind of a lone voice in that. One of the things he would say to parents is, when your kids come home, what do you say to them from school? How was school? What'd you do today? What'd you learn? And he says, how do they react? They don't say anything. They say, fine. He said, what you don't realize is they've been asked about 100 questions that day in all their classes. They don't want to be asked another question. Why do you ask that? Do you want to ask them another question to stress them out? And the parents say, no, we just want to connect with them, and that's our way of connecting, by showing interest. He said, well, if you want to connect with them when you see them, and this goes to what Alexandra says, when you see them, have a big smile on your face and say, boy, am I glad to see you. Boy, am I glad to see you. Or, gee, am I glad to see you. And if you want to connect with them that way. I thought that was sheer brilliance. So it goes along with what Alexandra was saying. You didn't have that, Jade. I didn't have that either.
No, and I was just thinking back to when I was a child, and we'd get that. So what did you do? And you clam up. You just do not want to answer these questions. But if somebody had said, oh, I'm so glad to see you back from school, that's fantastic. It would have been transformational, I think. What do you think, Alexandra?
Well, it's so simple. I think that's what just boggles my mind is these little tweaks in how we can communicate are just so simple, but they can have such a larger impact. And as you're saying that, I'm like, that's what I do. I pick up my son from school. Who'd you play with today? What'd you do? And so we've come up with a code word. He says taco. And if he says taco, then I know he just doesn't want to talk to me for a little bit and just needs some quiet time, and try and honor that. But I feel that same drive for that connection or to take interest. But it is so simple just to say, oh, it's just good to see you. And take your time. If you want to tell me about your day, do. And if you don't. But to keep that open, rather than kind of dictate what connection has to look like for them. Because just as you were saying earlier, Mark, like with their personalities, and you, JJ, like with their personalities coming out, all kids have different personalities, which means they're going to respond differently to how we are. But I think similarly with my background, I come with this little box of like, this is how it works. This is how I'm supposed to connect. This is how I'm supposed to relate. And it doesn't fit with every personality type. So being more open-minded, I think, is hard, but definitely more fruitful when it comes to that connection, or even in relationship as well, not just with children, but with anybody really.
Elaborate a little bit when you've said it on, I think at least two times, maybe three times. You could say, well, I'm still a work in progress. What did you mean by that?
Oh, I'm always learning. I wish I had answers for how all of this goes, or parenting, or being able to navigate grief. And I think as much as there are some really great strategies that I can use, it's not that I'm not using them necessarily 100% of the time. I'm going to still have good days. I'm still going to have bad days. I was actually just reflecting the other day of how I wish I could we're approaching 3 years since my husband passed. And there are still days where I'm getting flooded with different emotions and then wondering, oh my gosh, I feel that I'm up and down. I'm all over the place. And those thoughts of, oh, maybe by now it would have been different. I would have had a better handle on this. And the truth is, I don't know that I ever will. So I love being able to learn what other people do and then be able to see how it would fit into our lifestyle.
So can I offer you a therapeutic tip that you can try?
Yes, please.
If you can reframe when you're having those moments that your August 2020 self is screaming out to you, you need to come back and keep me company.
I haven't thought of it that way. Clearly, I haven't thought of it that way, but that's
interesting. And you might say, well, what does that mean? And she says to you, I feel so alone in this. I feel so alone. I feel so isolated. I feel so hopeless. And if you can come back and just keep me company. And instead of being instructional, just put one foot in the other. If you were to look at me and say, I'm back again, take as much time as you need.
I think that's great. And it's such a good reminder, and one that I think I need probably daily.
Well, you even admitted, you could say there is a part of you that lives your way in a kind of a practical, you like to be in control. These are the steps. And the point is, those are great at succeeding in life. They're not really great at connecting emotionally in life with others or ourselves. And they're both necessary. They're both necessary. I have trouble getting booked as a speaker because the speakers bureau say, Mark, you have too much kumbaya in you. we need to sell widgets, Mark. Okay.
Mine's usually the woo. There's too much woo.
Right.
If only people would just get over all of that. But the thing about grief, though, is that it's different for everybody. Everybody experiences it differently, and everybody takes whatever time it takes to get over it. There is absolutely no one size fits all here, is there?
No, and that time piece and being kind to ourselves. And that's why I say I need those reminders, right? Because there is this constant teetering of daily life versus that process and being able to emotionally connect, but you have to get things done during the day. And I know, Mark, you and I had talked about this on your podcast of when you get so caught up in the steps of the day that you've missed connection. And then, then you have, how do you almost, like for me, sometimes you have to sacrifice one for the other and then figure out, well, okay, connection is more important. It's okay if the dishes don't get done right at this minute, but it's a constant pressure that I do feel in my own process of trying to manage everything. That's something that comes up a lot. And, but also just being able to give myself some space and time to recognize on those days that are harder, that it's okay. And to go back and connect with my 2020 self and to just be, that listening piece and to just be in the moment is very impactful as well.
Yeah, I think one of the gifts of grief for me, my mother passed 3.5 years ago, around then, so 2020, and my father had passed a few years before that. So I became an orphan, as some people say. And I think that one of the lessons in all of that was to allow myself that time and that space. Some days it was just impossible to get anything done, and I allowed that because it was more important for the emotion to come up and be felt and allowed to leave. So I think it's important for people to understand that grief is multifaceted. It creeps up on you and it smacks you on the head sometimes, not just in the head. And you just have to allow it to pass through. And it doesn't matter if the dishes aren't getting done. It doesn't matter if you don't do the housework at all for a day. Just allow it to come through you.
So here's a tip for both of you. And I try to practice this. When you're in one of those states, say to yourself, JJ, Alexandra, don't be so effing scared about failing some stuff. It's trying to tell you, do you want to heal or do you want to just cope?
Yeah.
Let yourself feel it. It's not going to make you crazy. Just feel it and greet it. And it's necessary if you want to heal. And coping is great, but it's a distant second to healing.
Yeah. Yes. And I found, at least for my own personal experience, when I can actually tie some of that feeling to exercising, I find that it allows me to move through a little bit more easily. But I like the distinction between that coping versus healing, because I think that's a very poignant point as well.
Yes, I do. And I've heard a lot of people say that exercise really helps. I've never found that myself, but I can see how it would, because any exercise, any movement relieves stress. It allows emotions to travel through your body more easily. It is a good idea to, if you're a runner, go out for a run, go out for a jog, go for a walk in the forest, and just soak up all the great vibes that those trees are releasing. All their little hormones and essential oils that they shower upon us as we walk through the forest. It's comforting. It's healing.
Yeah, here's an exercise which I'd love you to weigh in on, JJ, being the practical alchemist.
Yeah.
Something that I suggest to people who hike. I say, when you're hiking, notice what you're noticing as you're hiking, and then you don't want to bump into people or fall off a cliff. Now turn around and walk backwards and notice, because when you're walking forward, that's a telephoto lens. And that's, let's take charge of this hike. Let's see how much we can achieve and accomplish. And boy, I love the feeling of, adrenaline and dopamine. Whereas when you walk backwards and it's a wide angle lens, the world is just trying to reveal itself to you. And if you just take it in like, whoa, what have I been missing by trekking forward and seeing if I can beat my last time?
Yeah. See, I don't walk like that, Mark. I've given that up a long time ago. I used to do, 20, 30, 40-mile treks in my youth across the hills and dales here in the UK, but don't do that anymore. Now, when I go for a walk, it's to soak up what's going on around me. And who cares how long it takes you? But I think it's a good trick. It's a good thing to do if you are that kind of person who goes for a hike and is just getting to the end of it and just taking the exercise. No, I stop and smell the roses.
Yeah. Well, let's shift to our wonderful guest, because I think we've talked over her.
We have. And also I want to, because we're coming towards the end, and I want to find out a little bit more from you, Alexandra, about what work you might do to help other people and how people can contact you. So tell us all of the details that anybody listening needs to know.
Absolutely. So I do have a website, forwardtojoy.com. It's all spelled out. And that's where you can find all the resources and additional information. I have started doing one-on-one coaching, essentially to help individuals really start to evaluate some of those childhood messages that we get that impact our adulthood. I am a believer that you can't really heal present grief until you heal the past grief that we have. And so this process helps individuals take those first steps to do that. And then I can be emailed at alexandra@forwardtojoy.com. And then I'm also on some of the social media, also at Forward to Joy.
That sounds fantastic. Yeah.
Is that forward to joy?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Forward
to joy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It sounds great. And I like that idea of healing past grief before you can heal present grief. I like that very, very much. Yeah.
It was a big part of my process. I didn't know I needed to until I started hitting some barriers and went, oh, I think I have some past stuff that's coming up that's preventing me from really being able to face some of the present emotions.
Yeah. And the book again is called Forward to Joy. Did I say Forward to Grief just then? I didn't mean to say that. Forward to Joy.
No, that's the website.
Oh, no, the Suicide Club. That's the book.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah. There it is. Yeah.
The Suicide Book, What to Do When Someone You Love Chooses Death.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So, recommend that anybody who has been going through a similar, life change, shall we say, to Alexandra, might find that book and read it, because I'm sure it will help you hugely from somebody who's experienced it, is going through it, has learned how to cope with it and heal from it. So that's us at the end of the show. I'm sorry to say, I really enjoyed meeting you, Alexandra, and speaking with you. Mark, as ever, it's been great to be together again on this show. But for now, that's all we've got time for. Do join us again and listen in to us on UK Health Radio but also on the UK Health Radio podcast. On anywhere that you can listen to podcasts, you'll find us there. And until the next time, it's goodbye from all of us, from Alexandra, from Mark and me. Goodbye.